Okay, leases, problem one. Let's take a look at this and see if we can make some sense out of what we have here. And I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. Here, they've been extra nice to us. They've given us the interest rate. If they hadn't given us the interest rate, we would have to find out what that interest rate was. That's not so terrible a task. Here's how you would do it. You would take the 123,288, divide it by the 16.5, and you come up with 7.47199. Go look at the present value of an annuity due for 8 periods, because that's what it's told, so we know that for a fact. Go down to 8 periods and just go across, and you'll find out that it is indeed 2%, and 2% quarterly is 8% annually. So that's how you would do it, and I would always recommend you check, because the CPA exam most often will not give you that information, and I probably won't. So the first thing we need to do with any lease problem is to do an amortization schedule. So let's start with that. And I always like to take the easy apples first. And the easiest of all apples is the lease payments. That's not going to change. Okay? The total lease payments are going to amount to $132,000. Because each payment is $16,000. Now the interest expense for period 1 is 0. So the decrease in balance is all $16,500. So $16,500 from $123,288 is $106,788. Now, next time around, we need to take 2% of this. And when we do that, we come up with $18,488 is the interest expense. And the decrease in the balance is $16,500 minus $18,488, so $14,364. Subtract that from our 106, we come up with $92,424 times 2%, and that gives us our interest expense of, I'm sorry, I wrote down the wrong number. That's the right number, but this is the wrong number. It's 2136. I looked at my notes wrong. Sorry. So that's correct. So now we're back on track. Now we're at 1848. Sorry. And 1848 from the 92, or from the 16.5. 1848 from 16.5. What we're paying, because we're always comparing these two. This minus this equals that, okay? And that gives us 14,652. And now our outstanding balance is 77,772. And continue doing that all the way down. And when you're done, you'll have a schedule that looks just like that. The takeaways: this is how much you're writing a check for each month. This minus that equals that. This subtracted from that equals that. So now we have the amortization schedule. We'll refer to that to do our journal entries, and ask you to do the journal entries. In a journal entry, every period is going to be exactly the same after the first period. Okay? So the first period is different, and then after that, it remains exactly the same. Because the first period, we're going to have a couple of additional, or a couple of new journal entries. So at the beginning, 1-1, we have the leased equipment for 123,288 present value future cash flows. We have the lease payable, same amount, 123,288. We also have at 1/1 a reduction to this, to the lease payable, of the 16,500. So we have a lease payable, 16,500, and a credit to cash, 16,500. Okay, and that's this entry. Now, for the rest of the period, for the rest of this lease, we're always going to have the same entry. It's going to be credit cash 16,500, debit interest expense, debit lease liability, and that's going to be the same for the rest of the lease. So we'll do one. I'm not going to do all 8 of them because it's kind of silly. So you end up with, for April 1st, we have interest expense, $21.36. We have lease liability, $14,364. Credit to cash, $16,500. And that's going to be the same throughout the life of the lease. Every period, we're going to credit cash, and we're going to debit interest expense and debit lease liability.